Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Own Your Essence podcast, where we get to have deep transformational conversations with some of our favorite people. I am your host, April DeMille, and today you can see I have my favorite guest co-host.
Lee Walczak. Hello.
Woohoo! I
Yeah,
always love it when you're here.
I'm back. I know. I like being here. Thank you.
hmm Yeah. So Lee is actually going to introduce our guest for today. And she's a pretty fabulous lady. So
She is very cool. Her name is Melissa Kim Corter, and I'm going to read her bio here. Okay, so as a highly empathic and intuitive child, Melissa Kim Corter was fascinated with other people's basements. Dark, unexplored spaces enthralled her, and her insatiable curiosity towards the hidden dimensions of the mind led to decades of exploring the shadow dynamics within the human psyche. That's neat. Melissa is a certified death investigator and is trained in traditional Jungian shadow work. She is the author of Apothecary for the Afflicted, Shadow Work for Invisible Wounds, a book about shadow work through the analysis of dark fairy tales. Her unique writing blends psychology with symbolic forms found in film, fairy tales, and forensics. How cool.
ooh, I love this. And so, just so you guys have a little background, Melissa and Lee and I do know each other, and I would say that we are friends, and we've all been connected for like 6 years or something like that.
For a
Yeah,
while, yeah.
it's been a while. Yeah. So we get to share our amazing friend with you guys.
Yay.
Oh, hi again.
Hey
There.
So Lee just read off your bio and did your little introduction. But if you want to tell our audience who you are and all the cool stuff you're doing, and we can start getting into some of this fun stuff.
Sure. Well, thank you guys for having me, first of all. I love you both. You're so fun, and I'm just so grateful to be here and spend this time with you guys. My name's Melissa Kim Corter. I'm a shadow worker. I'm about 4 months away from officially being a depth psychologist and finishing my PhD. And because I have a little bit of a sadistic side, I'm probably going to be joining another 5-year program after that to be a Jungian analyst. So essentially, I'm on this path of working with the dark side of the psyche and bringing consciousness to these things that make us really uncomfortable. Because I feel like as we do that kind of work, we start to discover there's sort of this invisible light and interconnectivity between all of these dark spaces that actually have a lot of meaning for us. So I do that in private sessions. I do that in my writing and my research, and basically also comparing dark fairy tales as modern day versions of what we would call like our true crime stories. And there's so much value in exploring all of that symbolically, a little bit playfully and creatively as well, to continue bringing these things to conscious awareness. So I definitely have a wide array of offerings and services and ways that I do that. But right now, I'm really loving the dark fairy tales and the hidden psychology within all of that. It's been really fun to play around with and explore.
Oh yeah, I bet. So we were just mentioning too, that Lee and I have had the honor of already knowing you. And I was just sitting here thinking, oh yeah, I met Melissa when she was like my professor at SWIHA.
Oh my
That's when
God.
I first, yeah. Like I was sitting there going,
Feels like,
where? Yeah, and that was
yeah.
like 6 years, 7 years ago. I think it was like
Yeah.
7 years ago. It's been a
Yeah.
while. Yeah.
It has been. That's right, though. That's right. I know it's such a weird thing. It was like a really significant part of my life and my journey, and also feels like gone in the blink of an eye. It's just
hmm
wild how that happens. It's so
Yeah.
crazy.
But also such important stepping stones in the story. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, can I ask you, you talk about like childhood intuition a little bit. So, how do you think that played a role in, uncovering these dark places now?
Yeah, I was just such a weird kid. I was a weird kid. I feel like so many of us can kind of relate to that now,
Yep.
right? Reflecting back. But I was a weird kid and I wasn't really afraid of, I guess, what you would call the typical things, but I didn't know that. Like, I didn't have an awareness of like, oh, this isn't normal. The games I would play, the interests I had. I have been interested in studying psychopathy and really dark people and personalities from a young age. Like I think intuition plays a huge role in that because I had this sense of knowing and feeling certain things that weren't being spoken. We might refer to like reading people, right? Being able to connect to others in a way where you're perceiving information and experiencing these narratives or understandings of someone else without knowing how or why. And so I had a lot of that in my childhood. It's so funny, my husband and I were just talking about this last night. We've been having this kind of conversation lately with people like what weird shit happened to you when you were a kid or did you have a lot of like tragic strange things in your childhood or adolescence, and people are like no, and I'm like oh my gosh, I've got so many stories. So I feel like it's a blessing and a little bit of a burden in a sense when you have heightened intuition from a young age,
Mhm.
that is often attributed to trauma or tragic situations. But thankfully, in my situation, I felt like it was more about what I was observing and seeing and sensing versus things specifically happening directly to me. So that played a huge role. Car accidents, death, tragic situations. I learned a lot about human behavior. I learned a lot about my ability to navigate crisis without understanding why. I would just go into like this compartmentalization of like, take action, do this. A concrete example, because all of that kind of sounds ominous. We lived at the end of this really haunted, crazy road. It's a really long story, but to summarize, weird stuff happened in that area. In fact, this road, they've done like movies about it and tell stories about it. It's called Clinton Road, and you can look it up. I was the last house before miles and miles and miles of forest. And at the time, people didn't have cell phones. So if there was an accident or something happened, it was at our house they would show up at. And I just remember being
That's
really
scary.
young, and it was so freaky. People would come to the door covered in blood and glass,
Oh
and
my
like
God.
I would just go into like call the cops, help get the glass out of their face, walk back to the vehicle, like just very methodical.
Yeah.
And I was compassionate and a very deep feeling person. But all of those weird kind of things I didn't know at the time were sort of a bizarre type of training, like leading to me where I would go later in my life. So situations like that, just tragic and kind of chaotic. And I've always been able to kind of make sense of chaos or find a deeper meaning in it. So even when I talk about darkness, I kind of laugh because I'm like, I don't even see it as darkness. I just use that as the language that is relatable for other people to kind of identify those themes. But yeah, I feel like that was a catalyst in training and teaching me about the things that you learn by paying attention to something that is not visible, but you sense it, that isn't something you just read about you can't avoid it. You know it's happening. There's something going on that's kind of unfolding in a way where you just can't deny it. Even with synchronicities and things like that, there were even like synchronistic experiences that someone might also call dark or uncanny. And I always found that so fascinating. And so I just found a crazy way to make a career out of it, I suppose.
Yeah, but what better way to just dive into your passions? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
also, I just want to backtrack a little bit when you talk about like some people are like, no, we didn't have crazy stuff in our childhood. I'm like, boring. I don't want to talk to you.
Right.
I'm like, get the fuck out of here.
It's so true, right? All the things that are weird become later, you're like, oh my gosh, like it's authentic, it's unique, it stands out. And I used to hide those things. I didn't
Yeah.
like weird. I didn't want to be labeled weird. I wanted to blend in and hide and not stand out. And yet I realized like all of these things happen for a reason.
Mhm.
And I do believe a lot of us that do this kind of work in all different capacities, like it certainly doesn't have to be how I do it, but there's a lot of people that do completely like radical different offerings around shadow work and their perspectives on it. But I see them as the truth tellers. I really feel they are the ones that are willing to lean into these weird, bizarre things, embrace it, and then find their way of like exposing the secrets, bringing it to consciousness. Um, Connecting the patterns, helping us learn and discover more about it, whether it's healing or shifting or something else. But yeah, I love that because there was a time where I was like, I don't want people to know about this. I'm not
Yeah.
going to talk about it. Like, I'm going to stay away from the weird. And now I'm like, nope, we're all in.
Yeah.
We're
So
all
I
on
did
it.
something very similar. I think Lee, you probably did too. I could say we probably have all had that journey where we like hid those parts of ourselves and they were shameful or, looked down upon or whatever because we were the weird kids and all the things. And I actually was the kid that was like, I want the life that looks boring. I need that. And now I'm like, "Pfft, what was I thinking?"
Right? That
Yeah.
season's over.
Yeah. I'm like, now, yeah. So for sure. Lee, do you have any questions?
I do. Well, it's funny because I feel like my first question, Melissa kind of answered, because one thing that sticks out about your bio, Melissa, is how you are always attracted to people's basements, which I love. So
Yeah.
it got me thinking, though, about how physical spaces often mirror inner spaces, right? And how it almost felt like a foreshadowing of what you're doing now in your work. And my question, which again, I feel like you've answered, so that's cool, but was going to be, do you feel like there were any other markers along your path that maybe didn't make sense at the time, but feel meaningful now? So it's so interesting to see how all of this has kind of accumulated in your experience and how it's all led up to what you're doing now. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. I love that. I love that I kind of answered it. And yeah, and that's also a great example of what April was referring to of like something I thought was weird about me or I didn't want other people to know. Like there was a time where I was really embarrassed. When I started to get a little bit older, I was like, oh my gosh, I just asked people to like go into the basement and look through their shit. Like, what was I thinking? And but something else that did come about from that specifically that I didn't learn until actually just about 3 years ago is how in Jungian psychology, which is a big piece of, the psychology I'm informed and kind of influenced by. It's not all of it, but it's a big chunk of it. To them, the basement is like the unconscious. It is the shadow. It is the part of the psyche that is the deepest and the darkest. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how weird that I wanted to go spend time in other people's basements. And now, as an adult, I do the same thing in their psyches. And the same thing that's also kind of like a through line to that is I've never had my own basement. No matter where I lived, no matter what, and I've moved a lot, I've never had my own basement. And so I think that's kind of strange too, how I would kind of explore these dark places in other people and look for like what I thought were their treasures or the things that were kind of hidden or unknown or their ancestral patterns. Like I wouldn't call it that when I was 6, but I might have been like, oh, here's this old picture of your grandma. Did you know this was down there? Or like, what is this box? Like, and other kids were like, really like, let's get out of here. I don't like it here. They always saw what felt like just the spooky side of that. And I kind of saw like the spooky, but the like magical. I'm like, but there's cool stuff. And there was a time I would do the same thing with attics, but I was definitely more mesmerized by basements. But anyhow, Lee, to come back to what you were just kind of what you were just sharing, there are some other markings I would say that I've been kind of really sitting with lately. And this also kind of speaks to what we're talking about regarding like the authentic self and our weirdness and kind of like the parts of us that are maybe at one point difficult to acknowledge or look at. And there is also this thing that I would do, and I've heard from so many people, like when I talk about this, they're like, oh my gosh, that's me. Where I didn't realize I was exposing people's secrets because it wasn't intentional. I wouldn't walk around saying, oh, tell me something, and I'll, go say it to the person that I really shouldn't say it to. It was never like that. It was more like I would get in proximity to people and somehow be automatically tuned in to what they were trying to hide. And I didn't know this was happening, but through just innocent conversation as a child, or young adult, I would talk about things that were linked to whatever was going on with them. And they would either be mesmerized by that, be like, oh my gosh, how did you know? Or repelled, as if I triggered something in them
Yep.
that they weren't willing to expose or see. And so I see this a lot with people that do this kind of work as well, or just kind of have a similar, passion for the work, where we can be deeply misunderstood
Yeah.
because there is this sense of getting really close to people, and all of a sudden they can feel vulnerable and be like, and really exposed and not necessarily know why. And you, as the shadow worker or the person that's kind of exposing that, you think you're just bringing up a random topic, or
Yeah.
just having lighthearted conversation, and they're just sort of like, oh my gosh. And then they start distancing themselves from you, or they can have a whole bunch of different reactions to that pattern. But it's actually a gift. We're sensing and tuning
Mhm.
into something, because I really believe that even within shadow, things don't want to stay hidden. They want to come to consciousness. And so we don't always know that we're a part of a process where we're unconsciously helping to unveil those things with the people around us. But then we can kind of become the target, or the person who is then blamed for knowing too much, for
Yeah.
seeing too much, for hearing too much by no fault of our own. So that's another attribute that I feel a lot of shadow workers have, for sure.
I'm actually glad that you touched base on that one because that's a big one. That's like
Mm,
because I've actually explained and talked about that on here too there's been plenty of times where we are disruptors. That's what we're supposed to
yes.
do.
Yes.
And that's our job. It's innately like ingrained in us. And like you said, we don't even realize we're doing it because it's just how we're programmed. It's what we're supposed to do. And we can get a lot of fucking backlash for that. Like
100%.
like you said, we can be people's targets. They'll distance themselves. They'll find a reason to not like us because, oh my God, we got too close. Now they're vulnerable and now they have to do the work and nobody wants to do the work because fuck that. That's heavy, right? Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
bleh, gross. Who wants to
Yeah.
do that? So like I'm so glad you touched base on that because that is just like it just hits the mark.
Yeah. There's something else that I was actually just writing about this morning, because I'm working on this dissertation that talks about a lot of these kind of things. And um, one of the things I was thinking about this morning, and I've been kind of deepening into this idea that shadow work is intimacy work, and
Yeah.
not necessarily in a sexual way, but in a way of depth, in a way of getting really intimate with details
Hmm.
that and circumstances and situations and behaviors that a lot of people would much rather not look at. And I, for a long time, and still lately, even, and Lee knows this, we've kind of talked about this too. I kept trying to find different ways to go about talking about shadow so people could look beyond the heaviness. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, that's kind of like a doorway in. It's intimacy work. And a lot of us are really like conflicted and repulsed by that and afraid of that, because when we do get close to certain things, right, it can go sideways, it can go wrong, it can backfire. But what I found is, like, it is such a beautiful process. It sounds weird to say that, but it is a beautiful process, because I feel so grateful to get to know these parts of myself and these different pieces and layers within me that I never would have touched upon had I not been willing to look into, like, these forbidden spaces, I call them. In fairy tales, it's the locked door. It's like there's a tale called Bluebeard, which is about this crazy, murderous, like, lunatic who gets married to his newest wife, and tells her, basically, the short version is basically, you can go in any room in this house except this one, and the door is locked. He goes away on a trip. He gives her the keys. She goes through all of these different rooms. She gets to the last room. Her curiosity gets the best of her. She unlocks the door, opens it, and there's all these corpses of his previous wives, like, everywhere. And so in horror, she recoils, she closes the door,
Oh
and
no.
she tries to hide the fact that she opened the door. But the key won't stop bleeding. And she keeps trying to wipe away the blood from the key, and it keeps bleeding and bleeding. So he comes home, he asks for the keys back. She gives him the keys, and he sees the bloody key, and he knows that she saw his secret. Anyway, she gets out of it, which is the good part of the ending. But the point is that, like, we're told to stay away from things in society or conditioning, whatever you want to call it. There are these forbidden spaces that I think it's part of our work to explore creatively, consciously, and then we'll realize they're only forbidden because whoever is for like forbidding us from going in there has something to gain from us not being conscious of it. So
Mhm.
that's why I love like the fairy tales and the connections between this stuff, because it helps us really see where we have our own blocks or resistance to going and getting a little closer, becoming a little more intimate to with these things that we don't want to think we're capable of or that someone else is capable of. And I think that's important because otherwise we have our blinders on and then we look around and go, why is shit so wild? We have responsibility in that, I believe. So,
Yeah, for sure. I have to say this because it's like eating at me. My intuition's like, say this now. Okay, so with that being said, do you have heavy Scorpio placement?
I have to look. I don't, not in like my big three or anything like that. It's not like I'm all fire. Leo, Sagittarius, Leo sun, Aries moon, Sagittarius rising. I have a lot of Neptune and Pluto, but I don't
Okay.
know specifically. Scorpio,
Is
I don't
that by
remember
Western
where.
astrology or is that sidereal astrology
I
by
think
any
it's more
chance?
Western,
Okay.
based like your natal, like traditional natal. Well, so we did archetypal astrology, which was like Jungian, but based on like that model of the psyche. So I'm not sure what that crossover would be because I don't know
Okay.
a lot about all different types of astrology. So I'm not
Right.
sure.
Okay. Just curious because I'm a rising Scorpio and a lot of my theme in life is death and rebirth, transformation, like all the thing. And
Oh,
I'm also drawn to a lot of darkness and have been since I was a kid. So I go,
yeah.
this seems familiar.
I wonder though, I have been told, I think that's my Chiron placement or something might be in that house
It
of
could be in the
death
eighth
and
house.
I think
Yeah.
that might be part of that. Yeah, I have a limited view of what I recall with those kind of detailed astrology. Same with
Fair
tarot.
enough.
I love
Yeah.
them both, but I'm always like, I've got to look at the thing in front of me or it just doesn't stick in my mind for some
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah. It's not a daily thing that just like orbits around you all the time. That's like there. Yeah. I get
Exactly.
it. Fair enough.
I will chime in though. I want to say I love what you said, Melissa, about, well, first of all, that, these forbidden rooms, who's ever is forbidding us to go in these rooms has something to gain from it. So I just wanted to highlight that. I love that piece. And I did have a question that kind of rides a little bit on the coattails of what you were just talking about these aspects of ourself and about conditioning and about um, all of that. So, because I know that you use shadow work and through the analysis of fairy tales, like you're talking about, and all of that, which I love. Um, and for a long time now, I feel like everyone's pretty familiar with Little Red Riding Hood. I know there's like different versions of that story, um, but I think a lot of the times it's framed as this sort of cautionary tale, right, against maybe like predatory men or predatory people. But for me, what has always stood out is this sort of theme, and I guess this is just my interpretation, but this sort of theme about abandoning the intuition, because there is, I guess, versions of this story that I have read where, Little Red Riding Hood goes into the grandmother's house, and before she observes anything, there's this feeling of fear. And she's like, well, why am I afraid all of a sudden in grandma's house? I usually feel very safe here. And then she starts seeing all these things that are out of place, like the big hands and the big eyes and the big teeth. And then she unfortunately gets eaten. So I feel like there's this kind of theme about sort of dismissing the intuition, whether it's because, politeness or conditioning or whatever it is. And I know you were just speaking about conditioning as well. So I'm curious, like, how this kind of shows up for you in real time with the work that you do, like how people tend to doubt and dismiss their intuition. And I'm curious too how shadow work can actually, if we're going to do the work, it can actually bring us closer in trust with that relationship of our intuitive self rather than further disconnect us from it. Does that make sense?
Yes, I love that. Great question. This is what I love about fairy tales is it's never the same. Although there are what we would call like archetypal elements, which isn't so much about a fixed archetype, like a figure that looks a certain way. It's more archetypal, which means it has layers of charged energy and experience. And so that fairy tale is incredible for that because it's also called like an initiatory sort of fairy tale where you have this innocence of the protagonist, leaving her home. So a lot of things start with that narrative. Psychologically, this is usually something where we are leaving the home willingly or unwillingly. That's an interesting tale because she's asked to go to grandmother's house, right? The mother actually gives her the basket in some retellings and says, "Hey, go bring this to your grandma," basically. So, in a way, she's called out of the safety of her home. So, right away, you have initiation, which means if we're paying attention, instincts kick in. But there's also a lot of retellings of that tale or versions of it where the wolf first appears on the path. So there's a point where she's walking through the forest and the wolf is like behind a tree or something like that and spots her. Some of the tales, the wolf will come out and say, "Hey, little girl, where are you going?" But he's not in the grandmother's clothes. He's in plain skin, right? In the fur and everything. Exposed, we might even say, like really showing who he is. And in some of those moments in the tales, there is a similar response of like, what is this creature? Is this safe for me to engage with? What does it want from me? It starts to go deeper into these possibilities. And it's also really weird in a strange way because you can apply that to a lot of really deep subjects. We can talk about different types of trauma that people have experienced. I actually had a client who's given me permission to talk about this. That story helped her recognize the grooming that started in her life before certain events unfolded by working with the appearance of the wolf on the path before the event occurred. So it's really incredible how you can take these patterns and just like you pointed out, Lee, like there's like this noticing of certain aspects and things, your awareness is drawn into that. And most of us will have similar things amplified in the tale that we're drawn to, but there will be other things that stand out too, only for us based on our psyche and what we're kind of going through. But absolutely, as an intuitive sense, it can reconnect us to our instincts, which is a great part of fairy tales, or the darker ones, I should say. It's not about the watered down ones that we've changed over time where we take all these things out because they're not uncomfortable. We actually need the darker elements in there because that's what gets us stirring. That's why I call it like the cauldron of the psyche. It gets all the things stirring. And it helps bring up emotions, feelings, sensations that we might be out of touch with if we are looking literally at these stories as if it's our life. But if we're looking at it at a distance through the fairy tale, it's happening to someone else, we actually can start to learn to trust those instincts a little more by playing with that in that safe and creative way, as if this is happening to some other little girl on the path. But when you get closer and closer to those details and you start reflecting the symbolism, it's like, oh, the path is really into the depths, into the unconscious, into the shadow. And then here's these figures, the wolf emerging. And so it's one way to look at it as like it's emerging on the path. What is it bringing to us? What is it activating? How do we feel? Do we listen to that? Do we ignore it? Do we dismiss how we feel? Do we deny what we're feeling to take on whatever that other presence is representing in that moment, right? So a lot of us will abandon our own intuition because something else has shown up and is calling our attention. So there's so many ways to work with that as an intuitive sort of exercise, but it's really a great tale because you can take almost any part of the entire story, break it down, and spend hours, days, weeks like working with that energy. But it works for children, works for adults, because it gives us what we call like psychological distance from our own narratives. So intuitively, also, we start to learn to read symbolically. So instead of like a typical logical sense of reading the words, here's the narrative, you start to read more what they say is archetypally or mythopoetically, where it's like it comes alive, it has an energy to it that's really kind of strange. It carries you through, you're paying attention and you're having a memory pop up, you're having a somatic, like visceral experience where you're like, why is my stomach churning? as soon as the wolf is on the path. What is that about? And when we can like take the attention off of the tail, bring it back to ourselves and check in, your psyche will always reveal more and more and more. So it's, yeah, I could go on and on about it, but I love that because it is a way to train intuition. It's a way to recover from any type of narcissistic abuse or other kinds of influence that have disconnected you from your instincts or intuition, or if just life in general has created a situation where you became more oriented toward your ego instead of your soul, meaning fitting into the world, playing by the rules, doing what people want, not listening to your deeper instincts, and instead going along, you can start to revisit these tales and recover that part of you and really embody it further and bring it into your daily life. And instead of only in moments of need, we can really kind of learn how to be led by that on a regular basis. So, yeah, I have a lot to say I could say about that, but sometimes I start rambling. I'm like, just shut me up if I go too far.
No way. I'm not going to shut you up. That's great stuff. Because like it really comes down to like you said, I feel like we live in a world these days that society is so dehumanized.
Yeah.
They're like so cut off from some of the uncomfortable feelings and whether we're programmed, conditioned, what masking, whatever it is, whatever that reason is. And that's where really the magic is because you're walking around holding on to all that junk, repressing and making yourself sick in all the different ways. And you don't realize that if you just turn around and face that bullshit, you'll actually get better.
Uh-huh.
And it's really hard to have it's hard to have the awareness for one when you've been shut off from it. And for two, then you've got to have the courage to just lean into it. And that's, a whole
Yes.
nother step.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so true. It's really important. It's hard. It can be hard work for some people.
Yeah.
Um, I'm very fortunate that I was a little bit of a black sheep from the beginning, which
Yep.
meant it was hard to kind of control me. In a
Yep. Me
sense,
too.
it was hard to shut me up. It was hard to um I might have I did silence myself and I did have, let's just say influences in my childhood that attempted to silence me as well, but it
Mhm.
never stopped the curiosity from this internal way. And because of that, I feel like I don't want to say I had an advantage, but I feel like my instincts weren't as they weren't as deeply buried or cut off as they could have been in those circumstances. And I have worked with people where it has been like that for them. They've had to work really hard to trust themselves, to trust others. Sometimes it also has to do with, this is like take it or leave it kind of a thing, but there's this thing called Jungian typology, which has a lot to do with our preferences and how we think and feel. And so some of us are just wired to be more intuitive. And of course, we can all develop it, work on it, all of that. But then there's also others that are wired to be more logical and use the more thinking. And so in that model of understanding, the intuitive function is in shadow. So it's there and it's operating, but they might have to work a little harder to listen. They might work harder to or have to work harder to understand the symbolism, to feel comfortable trusting in that invisible part of them. Especially when there's pieces or snippets of a story and the analytical, the deep thinkers, the ones that are more oriented with that kind of typology, they're going off measurable data. And so it isn't that they don't believe necessarily. They might pay attention to synchronicities and different types of intuitive information, but to train themselves to value that at the same level of the thinking mind, it can be challenging. So I've worked with a lot of women where one of the things we had to start off with was, all right, like it's great that you're analyzing, but how does that feel? Like, what
Yeah.
does the body say? What image do you have? What sensation? Like let's keep that really valuable logical information and let's build on that and see what else is there. And that's been kind of helpful. But for some of us, it's really challenging. And then, of course, however you're raised and your influences can dictate um, how much armoring you might have around your intuition, especially if you were told it was wrong or devil's
Mhm.
work or something. And I've had all of that too,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
religious influences, all the stuff. And it can take a lot to undo that, to be able to really reclaim your intuition as a necessary, inherent part of who you are with extreme, like, value is just such an understatement. It's everything, you know, it's really everything, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, and what better way to keep people cut off from the other pieces of themselves than to say you're satanic and you're this and you're
Right.
that? Like, what better way to do it?
100%. It's funny because that's a whole other piece of my dissertation that I almost didn't want to go into, which was like the subject of evil. And I had this crazy, wild, really cool experience while I was at school, on the grounds at campus. We had to do these like residential trainings. And while I was working on my subject matter, which was around psychopathy and the Western shadow, um, my professor was like, okay, everybody go for a walk. And we had these gardens and this beautiful, like, amazing, just gorgeous, outstanding area to kind of wander through while we're working on stuff. And it sounds like counterintuitive. You're like, oh my God, you're focusing on the shadow and psychopathy while you're surrounded by flowers and water in this labyrinth, but it was so perfect. Anyway, I sat down and I just wrote the word evil on a piece of paper. And my intuition, in this weird way, I saw the letters scramble and it spelled the word veil. And I thought, whoa, okay, that's interesting. And all of a sudden, it sucked all of the charged, creepy, bad, foul energy out of it. And I was like, oh, it's projection. What we are working with evil, I feel, and I know there's lots of different views on this, and I'm not saying my view is the only way, of course. Um, a lot of the time it's a projection of
Hmm.
what we fear that we're placing on the canvas of something else. And then we're calling it evil because the other side of that is then we don't have to deal with it. Oh, it's this monstrous person. That gives us that distance again. I could
Yeah.
never be that way, but oh, shame, and look at them. You
Yeah.
know, so we can label these things evil. And for some of us, it allows us to just be done, be separate from it, and never have any accountability in that, or not look a little closer. Because for some people, it could actually shatter the illusion of what their ego thinks something is. For them to discover there's a whole other world here. Like, wow, you know, talking to dead people, listening to your intuition, all these things are real? No way. Can't possibly be. That would shatter the ego. It would actually cause a collapse within that person. Some of those kind of people.
Yeah.
So instead, it's like, well, it's evil. That's what I was told. That's what I'm going to go with. And it allows me to judge you and to not look any closer, and it gets me off the hook. But
Yeah.
we know it doesn't really,
Right.
because the ones that had no choice, were attuned to these emotional states of others. We sense energy, we feel it, we tune into it, we bring things to consciousness, transmute it, whatever we need to do. We didn't have the choice to put the blinders on. So that's why I
Hmm.
think also we're like the truth tellers in that way, to even challenge these ugly, terrible topics that make people really uncomfortable. That's why I
Yeah.
love playing with like nightmares and possession in my
Oh
work.
yeah.
'Cause I'm like, let's just break it down. Let's see what's behind that. Because I feel
Well,
like 9 times out of 10, it's a you know, an illusion.
yeah, and I like that you touch base on like the cognitive dissonance that happens because like so I know this is one of the things I love about you, by the way. You have so much compassion and empathy for the world, and I feel like the world needs more of that because even those people that could have that ego collapse, they still need compassion, right?
Yes.
Maybe they're not ready because it's not their time, and that ego
Right.
is doing its job by keeping them protected, and I fucking get it,
Yeah.
right? Like we totally get it. All of us get it, right? But that is, I think, one of the big pieces of, the importance in compassion and empathy when, people are lashing out and they're not ready. It's okay that they're not ready, but also you don't get to be a dick to me because you're not ready.
That's right. I'm
So,
still not going to invite you over. I'm not going to call you back. I'm not going to
right.
answer you on Messenger. Like,
Yeah.
you can have all your feelings and I can have compassion for you. And I'm not letting that in.
Right.
I'm not going to let you, um, be just because your view might be limited compared to mine. Not, and I don't mean I don't mean to say I'm right and they're wrong. I mean in the sense of my experience that I'm having is very real to me, just like that person is having an experience that's very real to them. The difference is I'm being denied and attacked or whatever it might be, versus I can see both. Like you're saying, right? We can
Mm-hmm.
have empathy for that position and understanding of it, but it's not reciprocal, and that's dangerous. It's like, when you're engaging with someone like that, and I know not everybody falls into that, and I think there's a spectrum that these things fall on in these situations because you cannot believe in it, and still have an open mind and just maybe not had those personal experiences yet.
Totally.
But it's when there's a charge there, when you feel that you're like, yeah, they're not ready for that. There's some energy there, and it's usually a fear. It's usually something else. And that's challenging because I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's not always reciprocated, and that's been personally one of my struggles is having that type of empathy,
Mm-hmm.
being able to see multiple perspectives and yet not having it reciprocated.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, time for a boundary here. Like
Yeah.
this is just what it is. But yeah, that's part of the work I think we do too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you ever find, Melissa, there's like a loneliness that comes with that sometimes? Because I know that's a theme that comes up for a lot of people that I'm aware of, for myself included, where, there's this ability, like you're talking about, to hold space for compassion and the idea that like your journey is not aligned with mine or your belief system is not aligned with mine. And then having to kind of instill some of those, maybe boundaries where it's like, I'm not going to answer you on Messenger. I'm not going to invite you over or whatever it is. And that's needed to kind of, keep us in a place that is authentic and grounded to ourselves. But I'm curious if you have experienced that kind of feeling of, you know, I don't know any other word to put to it besides loneliness, or maybe any thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that loneliness that I have personally felt and continue to feel
Mm-hmm.
is what also allows me to look deeper into human shadow of others too. Like I know this is a little, I don't know if it's okay to talk about serial killers here or not. Okay.
Totally. Everything's free for all here.
So that's one area of my work that's been a significant part of my life. And I do not condone those behaviors. I don't
Right.
glorify these individuals, but I do recognize the depth of disconnection that can lead to those things. And there's something in my own loneliness and struggles with feeling separate from others, from being so sensitive and in tune with things, that makes it almost like I can bring that empathy and compassion not toward the person creating those actions, but to the pattern of disconnect. And they call it like human depravity, like that's really deep. So sometimes I feel like those of us that feel very deeply, that sense that loneliness that can come about from being in tune, aware, awake, you don't want to go back to sleep. You
Yeah.
don't know how to close your eyes to the things going on. You don't know how not to feel, and you can work on that your whole life and still be in a situation where it impacts and influences you all the time. So then, because of your own needing of boundaries and things like that, you might have to separate yourself from others. You might have to um, do those things and watch who you let in and to what, and it's exhausting. So I think that's
Yeah.
part of what fuels a bit of the loneliness too, is not only the sometimes feeling cut off, or sometimes very intentionally, like choosing to be cut off in order to be safe. That, in a way, has in a strange manner, like made it where I have a gift in looking at these murderous minds because I do understand disconnect. I can't, I'm not going to speak to extreme depravity or those kind of things because I'm very blessed that, let's just say, probably even in my worst moment, I haven't endured some of what these individuals have endured. And I know that I've certainly wanted to hurt people, and I have hurt people, but not to
Mm-hmm.
that degree. But I can
Mm-hmm.
see what happens when we become so deeply cut off. And I think that's why it's important to recognize that and not call people monsters or use these labels of like, we're better than them and they're abnormal or this or that. I'm sorry, but these days everybody's abnormal. We all have a persona,
Yeah,
which is
pick
the
your
face we
poison.
show to the world. Yeah, exactly. But loneliness, it's interesting because so the specific serial killer I study is the psychopath. And in German, psychopath was psychopathisch, which means suffering soul. And
Mhm.
in
That
our
makes
culture, I'll
sense.
speak to like Western culture, we don't have a relationship with suffering because we avoid it. So, isn't
Mm.
it interesting? So, I think that isolation, loneliness is one version of that type of suffering that some of us are deeply oriented toward and in touch with, which also can birth our compassion to be able to deal with all these other dark matters. So, I don't know if that answers it, but that's a piece of, for sure, I feel that. And it's something I have to work on my own story all the time of loneliness and feeling alone. I
Mhm.
used to have a lot of people around me and lots going on, and now I have like two friends. I have like my family is shrunk down. I've got my little unit of people and circumstances and things that are very, very small and intimate in that way. And I'm okay with that. But
Mhm.
it also came from this purging and culling of experiences that I had to make peace with, do my own shadow work on my own unmet needs that were attracting or allowing people or circumstances or behaviors to continue that were detrimental to avoid feeling lonely or disconnected. So there's definitely that's an ongoing piece of my own shadow work I'm constantly engaging with within myself to heal and to shift. And I think that ties into some of that Chiron wounded healer energy
Yeah,
too.
it does. But
Yeah.
I like that I like everything that you just kind of went over because it does, what happens in those moments of isolation is it does give us room for expansion. It's really what
Absolutely.
happens.
Yeah.
And I love that because I can relate to that too. There's been so many times in my life, and even still, because I only have like three friends and
Right.
my boyfriend that I love to death and my select family members that I hang out with, and that's it. Like
Yeah.
I'm good. Like I keep my
Exactly.
circle very tight and close and again it's more space for expansion and integration and all those pieces of us that continue to develop.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, suffering isn't about sitting in our woundedness all the time, or I think there's a misconception around that too a little bit. I think it's more about how we allow ourselves to process things and move through things and deal and cope, right? But in in the United States specifically, we buy our way out, we consume our way out. I was writing about consumption this morning because one of the things in my dissertation that I'm using, and I've shared this with Lee in the past, is this idea of the black hole and how like astrophysicists don't even have the equipment powerful enough to study it because
Mhm.
when they get close enough to the equipment will collapse. It will break. It'll destroy the equipment. The black hole is so powerful, they can't even get close enough to get more data. So what they have to do is trace the energetic, all the debris that is around the black hole tells them that it exists. The chaos, the path of destruction. And so I kind of apply that to these personalities too. It's usually this path of destruction that we intuitively will sense and feel. And other people who aren't listening, paying attention, not wanting to believe that these people or situations or whatever are capable of this, they're more deeply impacted because they're falling for the persona, which is driven by the ego and the shadow. And yet we're attuned to the soul just as much as shadow. So we can tell when something's inauthentic. We can sense and feel when it's not right. And we need our intuition intact so that we can engage with this because in our culture, we're being rewarded for that like consumption and filling this endless void, which I think that these figures demonstrate in a really amplified, intense, destructive way. But that type of shadow work, I think, is how we can also summarize 2025 in what we're
Yeah.
encountering in a lot of ways within ourselves and others, and whether it's political, whatever it is across the board, we all have responsibility in that. And that analogy, though, that metaphor is helpful because even doing our own work, we can say, okay, what part of me is being consumed? What void am I trying to fill? Because the other side of that black hole is the creative power of shadow. And that power is a force of its own that births worlds and ideas and innovates and solves problems. But you don't get to have the power of that if you deny only one side of it. So I think that's part of what we're also kind of collectively experiencing now is we're certainly seeing the destruction. How are we going to become conscious of healing these things to turn it into something powerful, uniting and creative instead of just going, I don't see it, it's not happening, it doesn't
Yeah.
exist,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I appreciate about you, Melissa, of many, but is that you, excuse me, you have this really this way of taking some of these abstract, or what I would call abstract concepts, right? And really grounding them in a way that I feel like is very digestible and very understandable. And so, whenever you speak, even now, about some of these things, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense the way that she's putting that. So I think that's really like a gift that you have that I just wanted to put out there and highlight, because I think that's so useful too when someone might have a harder time understanding some of these. Again, I'll use just the term abstract concepts to hear it reflected back in a more grounded kind of way through your lens. I think is probably very helpful, right? So
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's one of the reasons I'm also drawn to the darker fairy tales is because they kind of give that like middle ground for things that could be abstract um, or difficult to break down and assimilate. It gives us symbols, different patterns, different narratives to see things that are hidden, to see things that, and the other part of that is, and this is something I'm kind of like always working with as well, is that creative, generative part of shadow. And through the fairy tales, not only can we take like the abstract nature of, let's say, destruction, chaos, all of that, but like, oh my gosh, what happens when we take something out of shadow and we integrate it into the personality so that it becomes more of who we are? That's my favorite part of that too. So metaphors, storytelling, for me personally, when I hear other people share their personal experience and they have a metaphor or something, it helps me to break it down. And so I think that like through my own need of that, because I had a hard time when I was younger, really understanding, I understood energy. I could understand impressions, feelings, sensations, and like energetic language, but people confused me. So I trusted the stories, I trusted the metaphors, which then somewhere along the way just became a part of how I started to communicate more, because I think there was a part of me that really needed that so that I could kind of do my own work for a while. So thank you. That really means a lot that you said that, because that is something that it's not going away. I can't do it, and now it's unconscious. I feel like I bring it into everything I talk about, even just casual conversation. So it's nice that it's appreciated and seen, because it's helped me too. It helps me expand when someone shares something, and like all of us have heard like the onion metaphor, right? The peeling of the, and it's like, who has then not like the first time you ever heard that been like, oh, I get it. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
And I think those things speak to us in a way that bypasses the ego and lets us get in touch with some type of depth that's there through those images and stories. So yeah, so thank you for that.
I would
yeah.
agree with Lee too. Like, I feel like when you have the verbiage, you've got the vocabulary, the labels, whatever to kind of ground that stuff and give it a voice, it really helps people to digest it and to, understand it. And especially for the type of people that we would work with a lot anyway, who don't even know how to name their emotions, let alone anything
Right.
else. So
Yeah.
it's so, so valuable. It's super important.
I just recently discovered the power of using the tail Rumpelstiltskin to
Hmm.
help people name things. And I thought that
Oh,
was kind of cool how that's come about.
yeah.
So you just reminded me of that too, where I just randomly with a client one day, I suggested it. And then when we started to working together of like the retelling of the tale, we realized the power came in the moment that the name was spoken. And all of a
Mm.
sudden, like this little tyrant no longer had any power over anyone. And you started to see this collapse of the ego. And all of a sudden, this whole illusion of him being this dominant, like fearful figure is gone. And it's all because she had the courage to say his name, right? So there's something in that for sure. The naming of something, if we could just recognize the value that we don't need to know how, we don't know how to fix it. We don't have to worry about like, what do I do with all of this? But if you just start with naming something, you're already in touch with a process that's unfolding. I really believe
Yeah.
that it starts to reveal more of itself, and you'll be guided to the right person, the right phrase, the right story, the right experience, and you'll keep just unpacking it. So, yeah, I love that you just said that.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Okay, quick question.
Sure.
Um, I do have to like wrap this up sooner than I would like to. I'm so sorry about that.
It's okay.
But Lee, do you have any other questions before I wanted to do some fun little rapid fire real quick?
Um,
You have any
I mean,
more?
I could ask Melissa questions all day,
For sure.
but
We'll just have to
no,
do this again.
yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah.
will.
But no,
Absolutely.
we're good for rapid fire if you want to. Yeah,
You want to do that? Okay.
Ooh, rapid fire. I love
Okay.
it.
I just thought that these were kind of fun and
I'm
whatever.
curious too. I haven't heard them, so
Okay. So a symbol that that you're most drawn to lately, like most recently.
Skeleton key.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, the skeleton key.
Okay.
And tell me if you want to expand. I'm assuming rapid fire means just answer.
Well, how about this? You do what you want to do.
Okay, I love it. All
Yeah.
right, I'll just stay with skeleton key for that one.
Okay. Night owl or morning person?
Oh my God, both. Most of my life,
Re-
night owl.
Okay.
On the weekends, night owl. During the week, when I have to go to the gym in the morning, I'm a day person. Still a little bit of both.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, what if you could just describe shadow with one word, what would that be?
Unknown.
Yeah. That's actually great because it segues right into my next question. That's actually perfect. So, what is scarier, the unknown or the truth?
Mm, I think the truth.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the truth is scarier. Well, no, I don't know. I don't know. It depends on the circumstance of the context. How about this? Let me say it this way. I think what people think the truth will be is more scary than what's actually in the unknown
hmm.
because they don't know yet. So they assume the worst when it tends to often be. I have a horrible example. I'm sorry, but I'm writing about Jeffrey Dahmer in my dissertation, and there's a moment where I'm referring to like Pandora's box and the opening of the box. And there's a moment in his history where if his father had just opened the box, the whole thing would have crumbled. He would have been caught, it would have stopped, but he was afraid to open the box and more people were harmed. And so it's like Pandora's box. Do we open this thing that has all this chaos in it? Or do we know that yes, there will be an initial period maybe of chaos, but once we bring those things to consciousness, healing can begin, the truth can be come to light, and it is less painful eventually, but sometimes there's like a little window of intensity when we're in touch with certain types of truth. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like when I think about what's scarier, the unknown or the truth, I feel like I lean towards more the unknown because, like you said, we can create these stories of, how scary it could be. And a lot of times it's not even that big of a deal. But
Yeah.
like the truth for me definitely sets me free and like closure happens. So if I have the nugget, closure can happen whether it feels good or not. Closure happens. The healing begins. But like in that weird, phase of in-betweens and unknowns, that's the shit that scares the crap out of me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's also because I'm a control freak.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are. I resonate with that. And I think it's not knowing, and I think it also depends on how attached are we to a certain thing looking a certain way. And so
Yeah,
that truth that emerges might force us to confront that that thing is not what it is, or that it is what it is. And I
right.
think in different situations that can be really hard for people.
Yeah, true. Either way. Okay. If your shadow had a name, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I don't even know if my shadow had a name. What would it be? Esmeralda. I don't know. I don't know, but I like it.
Yeah,
It works.
it
Yeah,
works.
Esmeralda.
It totally vibes with your coffin chair.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's maybe that's her name,
Maybe
Esmeralda. I
that's
don't
her
know.
name. She's telling you. That's so good. Melissa, do you have like when people want to work with you, like the fastest way they can get a hold of you? I mean, I'm gonna
Sure.
have it all in the notes anyway, but like the fastest way that people can get a hold of you.
Yeah, thank you. My website, honestly, is the best thing to do. Go on there. My email address, all that stuff is on there. There's all sorts of links, things to click on. You can find out more. You can see what it's all about, get some information. There's articles, there's all sorts of stuff. But Melissa Kim, or actually, it's melissacorter.com, is just where I would go directly.
Okay, perfect. Is there anything else or any final words you would like to share with us before we say our goodbyes?
No, I just want to thank you guys for having me and thank you for allowing me to share this material and all of this work because there's so many people that are afraid to touch into these things. And it means so much to me when I get to actually share in this really uninhibited way. So thank you for both, like just being so supportive of that and asking amazing questions and allowing me to not feel like I had to shield myself or water myself down in any way. I think that's really special, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you. I'm actually so glad you got to be here. And thank you, Lee, for hanging out with us too. It's always
Yeah.
a pleasure.
I love
And I definitely think that we should do this again.
Yes, part two for sure.
Part two has to happen. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to stop it right here. So if y'all want to help me tell everybody goodbye, bye, you guys.
Bye.